think of ourselves as the most powerful beings in the universe, it's unsettling to discover that we're wrong. Time has come to see the world as it is.
Can we pull back the veil of static and reach into the source of all being? Behind this curtain, this random pattern generator, you will be responsible for an escalation that will destroy everything.
In this episode, I'm going to read an interview with a friend about a strange entity she has been seeing intermittently throughout her life. Layla. I have seen the same goblin / Nosferatu outside my window for over 20 years apart now. But, well, that's like all there is to that story. Me. Well, can you describe its appearance some more? Has it ever done anything? Made any movements? If so, how did it move? Was it wearing clothes of any sort? Did it seem malevolent, benevolent, or neutral? Layla. I saw it once as a little kid outside my best friend's window, and as usual I couldn't sleep at someone else's house. I've been racking my brain trying to remember anything more happening after that, because of what this figure is associated with in the encounters as an adult, but I was 8, so it's getting to be almost 30 years ago now. I only encountered it again after I started doing a lot of ceremonial magic, which has made my entire experience get more and more weird. This time it appeared in a reflection again, which makes me think it's actually something behind me, and seemed to foretell my mother-in-law's extreme sickness and hospitalization. I saw it again right before another type of health scare, though I'm having trouble remembering whose or where it was, since I'm really terrible at keeping a journal record. It looks like a cross between a D&D hobgoblin and Nosferatu from the silent movie. It seems to be a very personal attachment. I haven't seen it again for several years, which I'm not complaining about. I have a sleep paralysis story about another entity as well as this same entity appearing outside the circle during a different magical operation, like it was being nosy. Me. Can you remember how tall the hobgoblin fellow was? It sounds like a folkloric goblin. I know that must sound so silly to most people, but many old folktales originated from people's experiences with something. After much personal experience and research, I am convinced that, no matter how absurd it sounds, the fairy folk, if you will, are real beings who mostly exist in a state beyond our senses. It's just that, these days, in people's encounters with them, they are framed and defined as aliens. Also, those goblin fellows, for lack of a better term, are known to torment children. They really love scaring kids. Layla. And honestly, they may not be the same entity, but I had that knowing that it was the second time it appeared. This was definitely man height on both occasions based on the height of the window as a kid, and then I saw the full figure as an adult, which had that characteristic hunchback and long arms hanging the way Nosferatu does as he rises from the coffin, but at like a 3/4 angle instead of straight on, like he was leaning against the French doors I saw him reflected in. Or maybe I saw him in the hallway beyond the French doors, but only as an image in the glass of the doors. These doors are multi-paned, so he was in about 7 to 6 pieces of glass, as he was really just an outline in the hallway, like, "Hey, how's it going? Yeah, you're not really supposed to see me, but you caught me, so I won't keep trying to sneak back behind the wood of the door." I 100% agree that it is some kind of fey being, like a brownie. I've never felt malevolence from it, just that it's into startling me, and may have some kind of job being a portent for me. Might even be something hereditary attached to me, given the folklore attached to these kinds of beings, and my particular ancestry is almost exclusively British, Irish, Scottish descent, since ancestors arrived in America. Thanks for talking with me about it, as it's making me give it a lot more thought as a fey type instead of possibly some kind of goetic thing that's lurking, or just unknown thing I don't understand. I will endeavor to draw him for you later this evening. I've hesitated drawing him for a long time, just on instinct, so we'll see what happens. If anything. Me. Awesome, thank you. I would love it if you could tell me about the sleep paralysis entity encounter sometime. And now, the news.
What the hell in God's name is going down here?
A Mississippi woman says that an unidentified bipedal flying creature standing by a window outside her house startled her during a storm in northwest Mississippi, and that she photographed a series of footprints she believes belonged to the being. Marie, a 51-year-old woman who claims to work for the federal government, told Cryptozoology News that she was sleeping on the couch in the living room when the sighting occurred near Arkabutla Lake. It was around 11 p.m. The storm knocked off the electric from 8:30 p.m. until 1:30 a.m., she said. I could not rest because it was hot, sticky, and just uncomfortable. I could hear some dogs causing a big disturbance. Then a different set of dogs barking and causing a ruckus just a bit closer. Then it started with dogs just down the road, even closer, she said about the summer of 2013 encounter. As the barking continued, Marie reportedly walked to the window to find out the source of the noise. I could not see anything. I went back to the couch and to lie down. As I was attempting to rest, I literally saw and felt a shadow cover the window that was blacker than the black inside and outside the house. It startled me so badly that I immediately grabbed for the flashlight, convinced that someone was standing outside the window peering in at me. Nothing. Now, it could not have been a neighbor since the nearest one is at least 2 acres away and no one else in the house was up. I verified that. It was a shadow that covered the window that was darker than the dark. We are in a small, rural community. No one is out walking at night. No street lights. I immediately became fearful, my heart racing. I knew something was out there. The creature, the federal employee states, was large and could fly. She says she believes it was a Mothman-like creature known by the locals as Swift Peter. My grandparents used to talk about it. Supposedly the Swift Peter was some type of unseen creature that would attack or kill all of the dogs in the vicinity at night in a rapid fashion, explains Marie. My grandfather had coonhounds. He would often tell me stories about when he would go hunting at night and something unseen would go past him and attack the dogs. Once he said it went up a tree, but he could not see it even though he had a lantern. He said it really scared him, and it took him a while before he went hunting again alone at night. When my grandfather said it scared him, I took notice because he was a man that was not afraid of anything and did not joke around. The following day, Marie and her family discovered a set of 7-toed footprints they think could be evidence of the flying visitor. My mother was the first to see the footprints, and she called me over. At first, I too thought it was a dog, but I noticed that an arch, ridge, and heel, the tracks seemed to come from nowhere and disappeared. It had rained so much the night prior it was muddy. The tracks were beneath a plum tree, but no tracks led up to it, and they disappeared unexpectedly. It seemed as if they landed, took a few steps, and flew off. She says she is very familiar with the local wildlife and that she wasn't able to match the tracks of any known animals. And she thinks that the purported apparition could be somehow linked to the storm. I do not know why, but I just do. A couple from Long Island on Thursday said they saw a big serpent-like creature swimming in the waters of the Great South Bay. The man, a former correctional officer supervisor who provided his full name but requested to remain anonymous, told Cryptozoology News he and his wife were drinking coffee Christmas morning on their deck next to their house when they saw movement in the water. The weather was clear, our pier is 75 feet, and the serpent creature was 20 feet from it. It was moving fast through the water, he said. I put my binoculars on for a better look. It was like a huge moray eel. The alleged creature was described as 10 foot long length with a smooth brown body with 3 humps and a diameter of at least a foot. Each hump was at least 2 feet apart. It had no scales. It was a semi-smooth skin. The sighting reportedly lasted about 1 or 2 minutes before the animal went deeper into the water. The witness, who says his wife also believes it was a serpent-like creature, claims to have lived in the Great South Bay for over 17 years. I know all fish, birds. The bay has moray eels, but not that big. I have never seen anything like it in the water here, he explained. The couple say they did not take any pictures or video of the purported creature because they were caught off guard. No time for pictures. As quickly as I watched it, it quickly disappeared. A woman who killed her baby states that the infant had previously turned into a large snake and attempted to eat her. The unnamed 27-year-old Kwamhlanga, South Africa resident told the court on Monday that her 5-month-old baby had repeatedly turned into a python and that she was forced to kill the girl in order to avoid being eaten alive. The mother explained that she had murdered her baby by throwing her into a toilet where she was left unattended and later died. I heard voices telling me to take the baby back to the water she had come from, she told the South African magistrates, who by the end of the trial determined that the woman was insane and was referred to a mental institution. Similar incidents have been reportedly taking place in the African continent in the past few months. In Dolmasten, Kristianstad, Sweden, on December 20, 1958, Stig Rydberg and Hans Gustafsson spotted a mysterious glow in the woods as they were driving through a thick fog at 3 in the morning. When they stopped to investigate, they smelled a strange odor and spotted a disc-shaped craft resting on 3 legs on the ground. It was more than a dozen feet across and almost 3 feet high. But strangest of all were the 4 very odd beings hopping and jumping around the craft. These beings resembled jelly bags. They were about 3 feet tall and had no arms or legs. For a while, Rydberg and Gustafsson stood entranced by this sight when, quite suddenly, 3 of the bluish-gray blobs fastened themselves onto the witnesses and attempted to drag them back to the craft. One report mentioned that the beings had seized the men with rings or spirals, though this may have been a mistranslation of the tremendous suction-like force the men experienced. In any case, the creatures smelled terrible, like a combination of ether and burned sausage. The men tried to fight back, and at one point, Rydberg sank his arm up to the elbow into one of the creatures. Rydberg managed to escape when the entities began focusing their attention on Gustafsson, who had been climbing to a post. When Rydberg returned to the car, he began sounding the car horn. The beings then dropped Gustafsson and shot like lightning back to their ship, which promptly departed with a high-pitched sound. The entire episode lasted about 5 minutes. The men felt sick for 3 days, but a doctor who examined them found nothing wrong. Afterward, the witnesses reported the incident to the Swedish defense staff, and the media had a field day with the bizarre story. There are other cases of blob-like creatures seen in conjunction with UFOs in the literature, but most are by children. Some blobs glow green, or possess 2 black dots like eyes, or are filled with small circles similar to blood corpuscles. On October 11th, 1954, at 2200 hours, in Montbazens, France, a round craft 4 meters in diameter landed in a pasture, gave off a powerful red light, took off with a formidable acceleration when witnesses, garage owner Mr. Carrier and son, Mr. Gardel, a farmer, Mr. Genestre, a shoemaker, and 2 others, came close to it. Mr. Gardel felt an electric shock. On October 12, 1954, in the afternoon, in Maymora Forest in Morocco, a French engineer driving to Port Lyautey saw a dwarf about 1.2 meters in height enter an object which soon took off. The little man was wearing silver coveralls. On October 12, 1954, at 2100 hours, in Orchamps, France, a farmer, Mr. Biek, saw a small pilot enter an object. It glided over the road for 30 meters, then rose rapidly. On October 12, 1954, in the evening, in Montluçon, France, a railroad employee, Mr. Laudier, saw a torpedo-shaped metallic craft on the ground near a gas oil tank. An individual covered with hair was standing nearby, emitting sounds that were not understood. The witness went to get his friends, but the huge thing disappeared in the meantime. On October 12, 1954, at 22:30 hours, in Les Goavines, France, Jean Marty, 42, mechanic, was in his shop when he saw a luminous disc about 6.5 meters diameter and 2.5 meters thick land. He tried to approach it, but the craft rose vertically and silently at an amazing speed. On October 12, 1954, at 22:30 hours, in Sainte-Marie-d'Herblay, France, Gilbert Lillet, 13, saw a phosphorescent cigar in a pasture and a man near it wearing a gray suit, boots, and a gray hat. He held a flashing sphere and told Gilbert in French not to touch it. He went back inside the craft, which flew in loops and vanished. Now moving to some strange events in Northern Ireland. County Antrim, Bessbrook, Blessed Virgin Mary appeared regularly to 2 people at a grotto in the church and gave messages to one of them in 1987. In Port Glenone, farmers saw UFO 6 feet wide cut 40-foot tree in 2, 9 feet above ground, 28th December 1958. In Rathlin Island, sea captain saw a sea monster, June 1910. County Derry, in McGilligan, stones bombarded house, January 1907. In Moneymore, couple approached 3-foot UFO landed in bog, egg-shaped, bright red, with 3 dark red stripes. As Thomas Hutchinson grabbed at it, it rose and flew off. He had intended to take it to the police station, September 7, 1959. In County Fermanagh, Cunion, near Brookborough, poltergeist outbreak began in 1913. In Lough Erne, large round lights like motor car lamps seen near Lough over 7 or 8 years, 1904 to 1912. Moving to Norway, at Geirsgjon Bridge, 3 witnesses saw UFO which followed their car and hovered just ahead of them. They stopped until it took off vertically. The car paint color changed from dark beige to bright green, November 1953. In Hesdalen, near Trondheim, strange light seen in the mountain valleys, UFO researchers made extensive studies using radar, spectral analyzers, seismograph, lasers, and photography, but no positive identification resulted, 1981 to 1985. Many Norwegian lakes are reputed to contain lake monsters, including Jolstervatn, Korroderen, Mjølsa, Mosvatn, Sandstedvatn, Skodje, Snasa, Sogne, Storevatn, Soldal, Torfinsvatn, Tagritfjorden. At Lake Mjølsa, farmer and family saw 2 cigar-shaped craft pass overhead and fall into the lake together, 18th July 1946. In Namsenfjorden, man saw UFO drop 2 long objects into the water, December 1959. 5 years later, fishermen found object on the bottom 20 feet long. In the Norwegian Sea, man on a frigate 30 to 50 miles off the north coast saw UFO on radar, which dived into sea and was picked up on sonar, no visual sighting, late February 1963. At Oslorfjord, humped sea monster seen by people in yacht about 60 feet long, 4th October 1902. In Stavanger, woodcutter saw a tall entity emerge from landed UFO, then return and take off, 4th January 1958. In Telemark, Man was dazed when ball lightning exploded close to him, 21st August 1900. In Toten, poltergeist outbreak, 1935. In Quetta, Pakistan, during violent thunderstorm, ball of fire came down and set fire to haystack. In the ashes, several tons of glassy slag were found, January 25th, 1923. In Boyanai, Papua New Guinea, Reverend W.B. Gill, in charge of mission station, saw UFO and occupants on 3 nights, in company with Papuans, 26th to 28th June, 1959. In Lake Takatawa, New Britain, lake monster reports.
What the hell in God's name is going down here?
That was a public service announcement designed to scare the shit out of you.
He was abducted by aliens earlier this afternoon.
That little girl got lost under the bed and she went into an alternate dimension.
I'm going to read another excerpt from the book Cosmic Voyage by Courtney Brown. One day my monitor reported to me that a remote viewer was recently able to remote view her own abduction. She was apparently abducted in classical UFO ET style many years previously. The session to which my monitor referred was conducted under highly controlled Type 4 conditions, viewer blind, monitor front-loaded. What made the session's data so surprising was that the viewer was able to view a UFO abduction at all. Again, this, in general, had not been possible previously. A false replacement signal had always been received. Neither my monitor nor I drew any conclusions regarding this episode at the time, but we did notice the change. A few days after this conversation, we found out what occurred to make this possible. The preliminaries indicated a target associated with dry land in a man-made structure. I'm getting brown and tan colors, rough and woody textures. The temperature is warm and comfortable. I am smelling something like turpentine, and it seems like an outdoors woodsy smell. I will AOL this as a forest for now. Move to stage 3 and on to stage 4. I am getting a wooden structure, like a house, moving into the structure. There is a wooden table. This seems a bit oldish. The internal structure of the place is square, or minimally rectangular. This is a very simple dwelling unit. Move on to stage 6. Let's do a movement exercise. He moves me to 500 feet above the structure. There is a mountain and a road nearby the structure. There is also a river and apparently either a rapids or a waterfall near the structure as well. Do you want me to investigate this? He has me do a variety of procedures designed to identify the location of the structure with regard to nearby topographical features. Courtney, go back into stage 4 and move back inside the structure. Let the unconscious solve the problem. Okay, I'm back inside now. There is a person here, a human male. He is wearing work clothes, a plaid shirt, jeans. He has a beard. I do not pick up much activity of any sort. Give yourself some freedom of movement and time. Let your unconscious solve this. Give me a moment. Okay, I'm getting a strong sense of fear from inside the house. It is at night. I have experienced a small time dislocation. I'm getting a sense of ET activity. This is strange. An abduction. I'm putting this down as an AOL, but from the signal line. Keep the structure, continue. The table is still there, as is the wood floor. But there are a number of grays here now. Some of them seem to be floating in the air. They are wearing uniforms, and they are moving quickly, like they have an agenda that needs to be accomplished with great haste. There is a woman here now. She seems to be in the center of their activity. They are levitating the woman up and through the window of this house. I do not think that window is open. She just went right through the thing. I am following her and the grays outside. There is a very bright light here. Looking around now. The grays are taking the woman up into a large ET ship. I am sketching the ship now. I am also sketching the scene inside the house when she was moving through the window. Move into the mind of one of the grays. Find out what they are doing. Hold on. Doing that now. This is a survival project. It is their work, their job, in the sense that this is what they do for a living. The idea of survival is very broad, as it is for everyone. Now go into the mind of the woman. Stay in the stage 4 matrix. There are definitely multiple levels to her understanding of the situation. On the top surface, she is sedated. Just below, but still at the human level, she is terrified. Further below, at the subspace level, she is happy, even ecstatic. What is the criterion for selection? She selected herself. She volunteered. Go into the ship, stay in stage 4. Doing that now. Wow. Dump the aesthetic impression in the matrix and move on. There are many grays here. There are huge numbers of operating tables. This is an expansive place with lots of activity. All of the grays are very busy. There are other humans on board, apparently all brought on by the grays. Are there any other types of ETs on the ship? There are only grays and humans on this ship. The woman from the wooden house is on a table now. She is screaming. There is a tall gray looking between her legs. They are examining her and doing something. Apparently I'm being noticed. Someone is literally pushing me to look at certain things. It is the sense of being pushed hard into a passage or through a door. I get the sense that someone wants me to see something. I am actually in the uterus of the woman now. Oh, there's a fetus here. I get the sense of a light. perhaps artificial, lighting up the place. The fetus is on the way out, and I am following the removal of the fetus. The fetus is now outside the woman. She is very calm, exhausted, perhaps just out of it. She may have fainted. The fetus is being put quickly into a liquid in a clear canister. How long is the fetus in the canister? A short time for this particular tube. I am now getting this information from an adult Grey who is patiently standing near me. The being seems to be some kind of nurse or midwife, a caretaker personality. The Grey is telling me that a baby gets shuffled about as it matures. Later it goes into a large canister until it comes out completely. Ultimately, the removal is like a normal birth. The baby is taken out and given air to breathe. How long is this operation going on? I am being told that this is a major breakthrough with humans. The decision has been made just recently to show humans, well, i.e. us, the entire project. The Greys will no longer interfere with our remote viewing attempts. We can now watch the so-called abductions freely. They are hoping for a change in Grey-human relations, and they are doing this as a major concession, although perhaps this is the wrong word, on their part. They want to work cooperatively with humans. With regard to the current intensity of their activities, this is a new operation. The project has taken on a new direction, from continuity and slow change of the past to rapid, major evolutionary advances that will allow Greys and humans to be self-determining. Apparently this change has been dictated by larger Federation decisions. Changes required of the Greys, and they also are required to help humans. There is a definite sense of long-term appreciation of help regarding what the humans have given voluntarily to the Greys. Okay, that is enough for now. End the session. That session took a long time. I'm exhausted. Well, tell me what that target was. Federation current Earth operations. Looks like things are going to be different from now on. It gives one pause. It should be noted that the current session took place only a few weeks after the release of John Mack's book on the ET abduction phenomenon. Mack's treatment of the phenomenon is perhaps the most sensitive and positive with respect to the Greys in the extant literature. It could be that the Greys decided to change their tactics regarding our remote viewing attempts because they concluded that we are now capable of understanding the phenomenon without the fear that was so typical of our previous reactions to their activities. However, it could also be that they decided that hiding their activities from human remote viewers served little purpose, given the fact that so much information had already been uncovered, using hypnosis as the primary investigative tool. Yet the additional possibility exists that the Greys will now allow us to see their activities because of the positive nature of Mack's book, perhaps thinking that they might now get a fair shake in the inevitable trial that will emerge in the court of public opinion. Following this session, my monitor interacted with a number of remote viewers who targeted ET abductions under highly controlled Type 4 settings, and all met significant success. Sometime during the month of May 1994, the Greys had changed their behavior with regard to how they choose to interact with humans, a highly significant act because it demonstrates an evolutionary change in how Greys think about humans. We are being considered on a somewhat more equal level with them, at least in the sense that we can watch each other's activities freely. I suspect that this could be seen as a precursor to much greater cooperation in the future. Perhaps the most important datum to come from my current session was that at least one abductee was abducted voluntarily. The idea that I got during this session was that this particular abductee had multiple layers of awareness within a complex structure of consciousness. At a deep level, she was aware of the abduction experience and was happy to participate in it. Yet her conscious mind neither remembered any previous agreements to participate, nor did it want to participate further in that which seemed only horrific. Given the multi-layered structure of human consciousness, I can also see how confusing it would be for the Greys and why they might have conducted the abductions in a seemingly callous manner. They would be aware of the person's original agreement to participate, perhaps made even before physical birth, and would thus disregard the physical human's panic. Perhaps they would assume that all will be forgiven when the abductee's physical body dies and its subspace personality becomes freed from the confounding influence of physical awareness. It seems recent human activities have encouraged a change in Grey behavior. If the Greys are indeed working to help humans as well as themselves, they may have much to gain by treating us as active participants in this venture.
Time has come to see the world as it is.
Read a selection from the book, UFOs, JFK, and Elvis by Richard Belzer. This section is called Tout 10 Myths About Aliens and UFOs Equal One Big Lie. Myth number 1. We can't believe any evidence of UFOs because such evidence is purely anecdotal. This premise hinges on the idea that we all agree that all people other than government officials and us are either nuts or full of shit. Of course, all you have to do is take a good look at the people around you in the 7-Eleven Slurpee line and realize there is a certain amount of truth to this observation, but if UFO sighting claimants and abductees are really the Forrest Gumps of the world, why do the powers that be go to such lengths to marginalize, neutralize, and silence them? Maybe life is just a box of chocolates. The real stuff is hidden in the middle of a bunch of overly sweetened fluff. 2. Normal people like us don't know any wackos who believe they have seen UFOs. My college geometry professor would call this a corollary to the previous entry. He'd still be calling it a corollary today if he hadn't been turned into a quad kill by the landing gear of a UFO. Although this factoid might seem true, Jim Marrs believes we all know somebody who has seen, been in contact with, or has experienced some kind of extraterrestrial phenomenon. And to prove it, all you have to do is this. First, let it be known that you are interested in alien theory, then make it clear that you are open-minded enough to accept any anecdotal information you are offered without making any judgment. Marrs predicts that if you just do those two things, people you have known all your life will suddenly come forward to tell you their UFO story, even if the people you know are conservative Republicans. See Barry Goldwater's quote, page 156. Going to that quote, the subject of UFOs is one that has interested me for some long time. About 10 to 12 years ago, I made an effort to find out what was in the building at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, where the information is stored and has been collected by the Air Force, and I was understandably denied the request. It is still classified above top secret. I have, however, heard that there is a plan underway to release some, if not all, of this material in the near future. I'm just as anxious to see this material as you are, and I hope we will not have to wait much longer. 3. Terrifying tales about men from another planet, curiously similar UFO-related experiences, complaints of peculiar physical maladies and symptoms. These aren't the objective observations of independent witnesses, they are symptoms indicative of some kind of mass hysteria. Oh, I see. UFOs are too weird to be real, but a complex, heretofore undiagnosed, contagious, worldwide mass hysteria that people have been reporting for 4,000 years. Hey, we can buy that. Too bad it's not true. As Jim Marrs told me, hey, if all we had were the abduction stories with no other evidence to back them up, no other UFO sightings, no history of UFO sightings, no ancient writings, I'd be the first to say that it must be a mass psychosis. But the internal consistency of the contemporary abduction stories and everybody else's abduction stories placed in the context of the last 50 years of UFOs, then placed in the larger context of man's prehistoric reports of people coming to Earth in flying machines, well, the evidence is just there. So it is. And couldn't 50 years of dogged denial be considered a symptom of mass hysteria? Just wondering. 4. If UFOs were real, they would make their existence known to our government. Oh, absolutely. Any being, green, gray, or otherwise, with a story to tell is just dying to tell it to some bureaucrat. Hey, look how peacefully all those JFK assassination witnesses are resting after having gotten their stories off their chests. Every U.S. president since Truman has known perfectly well that we are being visited by booga-boogas from another world. In fact, Truman was so convinced of it, he instituted the National Security Council in part to protect us from any threats from the vast beyond. But do aliens want to commune with our leaders? Jim Marrs believes that they are attempting to go that route and have since decided that Earth's bureaucrats aren't worth contacting. As Marrs told me, there's a good argument that can be made that, back in the 40s and early 50s, extraterrestrials tried to make contact with certain leaders around the world. They were thinking, okay, let's try and get the story out and get you humans up to speed with the rest of the intergalactic community. But what they found was that these leaders, probably ours as well as those in the Eastern Bloc and everywhere else, were afraid that acknowledging ETs would cause them to lose power. Plus, of course, each country wants to keep the technology to themselves. So the ETs said, well, this is a screwy situation, and over a period of time they decided to simply bypass the leadership and appeal to the common people, which is what led to the recent increase in sightings and abductions. 5. There is no earthly reason for the government to withhold credible evidence that ETs exist. If we aren't publicly acknowledging UFOs, it is because the evidence proving their existence isn't there. If the powers that be aren't acknowledging UFOs, it's because they fear for their jobs. Check out this excerpt from an article that appeared in the New York Times on December 15, 1960. Mankind is warned to prepare for discovery of life in space. Brookings Institution report says Earth's civilization might topple if faced by a race of superior beings. Washington, December 14th. Discovery of life on another world could cause the Earth's civilization to collapse, a federal report said today. This warning was contained in a research report given to the National Aeronautical and Space Administration with a recommendation that the world prepare itself mentally for the eventuality. The report, prepared by the Brookings Institution, said, while the discovery of intelligent life in other parts of the universe is not likely in the immediate future, it could nevertheless happen at any time. Discovery of intelligent beings on other planets could lead to an all-out effort by Earth to contact them, or it could lead to sweeping changes or even the downfall of civilization, the report said. Even on Earth, it added, societies sure of their own place have disintegrated when confronted by a superior society. Can a society that debates whether ketchup constitutes a vegetable be called a civilization? I've got my doubts. Beyond that, given the choice, with whom would you rather cast your lot? A career politician who, in 20 years, hasn't figured out how to provide health care for most of our citizens, or a being who knows the secrets of the universe, has mastered intergalactic travel, and may even be able to vaporize people who piss him off? There you go. Bear that in mind the next time you cast your vote for Trent Lott. Number 6. There is something vaguely blasphemous about belief in aliens. That's why God, him, or herself is anti-alien. Hear me. Most people who believe in God or a higher power or whatever believe that his or her God is the God of everyone in the universe. So what's the problem if she is also the god of little gray men who drive around in spaceships rather than Hondas? If one god can be the god of Attila the Hun and Mother Teresa, he or she can be the god of everybody. Of course, there are people who believe that single-parent families dancing while vertical in PVC piping could also undermine all they hold sacred. But since what they hold sacred is a repressive status quo, I can only hope they're right. So there. And don't make me go through this basic stuff again. 7. Since UFOs could only have been created by a technologically superior civilization, and no intelligent life exists in space, there can't be any UFOs at all. The airbags in our cars can be fatal, and you can't nuke a veggie burger that isn't frozen in the middle and burn on the edges, sort of like your testicles if you've been standing too close. Considering the technological botch jobs we live with every day, it is easy to believe that UFOs are so complex they could only have been created by some superior species, but according to what researchers have learned, that is simply not true. Flying discs of human making were developed by the Nazis during World War II. In fact, Wernher von Braun and John Kennedy reportedly met a few times to discuss how the spaceships American scientists were developing might be fueled. And the next thing you know, Tang powdered drink mix hits the market. Is there any connection? But what makes this issue confusing to a lot of people is the fact that the experts are always trying to make UFOs an either-or situation. Either flying discs are created by human technology, or they're something from outer space, and the truth is they're both. What Jim Mars told me is this: there's no question that when we overran Germany at the end of World War II, there were plans on the drawing board for flying discs, some powered by jet engines, but some powered by electromagnetism and other non-conventional power sources. The only question is, did the Nazis get to the point where they actually developed something that flew? That's where the controversy is. In his book Alien Agenda, Mars tells a fascinating story about Wernher von Braun and SS officer Ernst Kammler. Ernst Kammler was a high-ranking official who reported directly to Heinrich Himmler. He was also prominent within the Waffen-SS, so prominent, in fact, that at the end of the war, when the SS was pretty much taking over everything, he was put in charge of stewarding the Nazis' top-secret rocket programs, with scientists and V2s and all, to a safe haven near Munich in Bavaria. He told me, the scientist at that time, that his plan was to give himself up to the Americans and to offer them the rocket scientists and the rockets, in other words, Germany's technology, in exchange for his life. Sure enough, Kammler disappeared shortly thereafter and was never heard of since. Of course, as we now know and as history records, when the Allies piled into Bavaria, they captured Wernher von Braun and the V2 rockets and all that technology. So that makes me wonder, what technology did Kammler know about that allowed him to bond with the Allies? What plans did he take off with? And where did he get those plans? Were they pulled from German ingenuity or from a wrecked alien craft? Which brings us to number 8. No American functionary has ever captured anything remotely resembling an alien spacecraft. Have we found wreckage? Shit, we're flying it. Jim Mars told me about a case in Texas in the mid-80s in which 2 women and a boy encountered what appeared to be a big glowing UFO surrounded by helicopters. The disc, they said, was airborne, but it was wobbling and spinning and flashing as though it were in some distress. You know, kind of like a 1972 Gremlin did before you put it up on the blocks in your front yard. Anyway, a few days later, these people started experiencing some strange physical symptoms. Their skin was burned, their hair was falling out, and horrific lesions were developing on their bodies. They went to the doctor and were immediately diagnosed with radiation sickness. Naturally, they had pleaded their case with the United States government, saying, hey, this was some kind of test you were doing and it harmed us, and now we want some kind of compensation. But the government denied having any such technology, so the court threw it out. Through sources Jim Mars has developed in the military, he has learned that, in that particular case, they were testing a UFO, that is, an off-Earth craft, yet the military get capture somehow required. To try to get it to go, they put a little nuclear power plant into it, like from a nuclear submarine. They believed they were going to fly it with this fission-based power plant in it. There they were, spewing radiation all over the place. Not that they aren't averse to exposing innocent citizens to little radiation now and then. Heck, who isn't looking forward to the day when strippers have 3 breasts? 9. UFO abductees aren't troubled because they've been exposed to aliens. They are simply troubled people. Period. Or are they? Jim Mars suggests that the abductions we tend to hear about in the media are those that make for an exciting broadcast. In other words, precisely those that are traumatic, frightening, and/or painful. But that doesn't mean all abductees believe their encounters with aliens are akin to interstellar date rape. When we hear about alien abductions in books or on TV talk shows, we are generally hearing from those abductees who are seeking help or information or communion or guidance, and that's fine. There are plenty of people out there who can empathize with their experiences. But what we rarely hear about are the many, many people who have had alien encounters but did not regard them as painful or fearful. These people aren't looking for help or compassion or anything else. You don't hear about them because they don't need their experiences clarified by a talk show host. Nor are they seeking the ridicule that goes hand in hand with going public. As for the game of name that not the authorities have been playing for the past half-century, isn't it possible that people who deny every possibility without ever looking at the evidence are the real nuts here? I mean, it's like blaming, say, the next schmo to walk past the Coke machine for a presidential assassination without any eyewitness testimony or proof. How sane is that? 10. Free and democratic America is the most open and honest country in the world. No rational person believes there has been anything but a totally upfront and candid exchange of ideas on this and every other controversial subject. Maybe public flogging isn't the preferred form of discipline in this country, but it can be if you're willing to pay for it. But free and democratic America is no place to initiate an open and honest dialogue about anything. Oliver Stone's film masterpiece JFK was lambasted by the critics before it was ever shown, and the Intimidators have similarly trounced his latest work, an expose of the controversial downing of Pan Am Flight 800, and that's only the beginning. The life work of credible but politically incorrect researchers has gone unread, and people whose thoughts wander beyond the parameters of acceptable theory are routinely silenced, either professionally, politically, or, when necessary, physically. Open and honest? Tell that to Lee Harvey Oswald's corpse. And the pervasive atmosphere of mistrust, intimidation, and fear has trickled down to the personal level. A friend of Jim Mars's told him a story that illustrates this perfectly. It seems that when this friend was a college student, he and a buddy were driving along a highway at night when they saw a strange light. The light was not stationary like a star, nor did it move in straight lines like an airplane. It hovered, it dipped. It did things no conventional aircraft could possibly do. The men continued watching in silence until finally the craft just shot straight up in the sky and disappeared. At that, Mars's friend turned to his companion in awe and remarked, "Wow, did you see that?" But instead of discussing what they had just witnessed, his friend just flew off the handle. He got very angry and snapped that he hadn't seen anything and just shut up about it. For this man, if he didn't admit to seeing a UFO, he wouldn't have to deal with the truth of having seen a UFO. Unfortunately, this is the same attitude alternative historians and UFO researchers have been up against for 50 years, at the highest levels as well as at the most intimate. There are people in open, honest America who have seen and experienced these things firsthand, but in order to protect their reputations, careers, and relationships, will tell you that it didn't happen. Gather up a few hundred of those people and you've got an informational Stonewall. Convince several thousand men and women they'd rather not be this year's Oliver Stone, and you've effectively blacked out the truth. Now, what were you saying about those strange lights you saw? Nothing? Yeah, that's what I thought. Do you see a problem? I'll bet you don't. Do you see a big difference between getting your information from independent researchers like Jim Mars and getting fed the same old lies by national media? I'll bet you do. For one thing, researchers are willing to address the issues. Any issues. They don't pretend evidence isn't there when it is, or that it is there when it isn't. They don't have to lie to protect the guilty because they aren't getting paid by the guilty. And their information isn't filled with disclaimers, innuendo, or attempts to mislead or distort. Eliminating redundancies like those leaves a lot of room on a page for truth. Of course, if you prefer your information watered down, twisted, or politically sanitized, you can still get your news from the Fifth Network, CIA. But to those of you who don't, I say stay tuned. The truth is in here.
Time has come to see the world as it is.
I'm going to read another excerpt from the book My Life with the Spirits, The Adventures of a Modern Magician by Lon Milo DuQuette. The lodge was growing steadily, and the new members were understandably anxious to meet and study magic. I scheduled a weekly class in our home and began organizing my thoughts concerning the fundamentals of magic. It was finally sinking in that there were some people in the world who actually knew less about the subject than I. The class was attended by some very bright people, and in short order I realized that in order to stay one jump ahead of them, I was going to have to study very hard and be resourceful. My role as classmaster was more as host and moderator. Several members of class were already far more knowledgeable than I in astrology and other occult sciences. By the time we mastered the pentagram and hexagram rituals and had consecrated our elemental weapons, it was clear I was going to have to come up with something dramatic. I combed my gems from the equinox for something exotic and different, and turned to Liber Chinook, a brief abstract of the symbolic representation of the universe derived by Dr. John Dee through the scrying of Sir Edward Kelly. Between 1582 and 1589, Dr. John Dee, who lived from 1527 to 1608, English magus and mathematician and astrologer to Queen Elizabeth I, together with clairvoyant Edward Kelly, who lived from 1555 to 1597, in an attempt to communicate with the angelic hosts of God, as did the patriarch Enoch, hence the term Enochian, involved themselves in an amazing series of magical workings. Their efforts yielded a wealth of magical information, including a detailed dissection of the phenomenal and spiritual worlds in an angelic language used to evoke particular spirits and access the various levels of heaven. Dee kept copious notes, many of which survive today. Much Enochian material was incorporated in the Golden Dawn's Adeptus Minor program. Crowley's Liber Chinook was a digest of this material. Liber Chinook was full of magic squares, charts, diagrams, and a series of calls in a strange angelic language. If the class wanted exotic, this certainly looked like it. At our next meeting, I announced that we would soon begin a 6-week Enochian magic workshop. At the time, the material in Gems and Rhaegar D's Golden Dawn was the only information I had on the Enochian system. I read through the text several times and came to the conclusion that I would understand the material better if I constructed the various pieces of Enochian equipment. These consist primarily of 4 elemental tablets, one each for fire, water, air, and earth, and one smaller tablet of union, or spirit tablet. Each elemental tablet is composed of 156 truncated pyramids. Each pyramid, or square, is lettered on top, and each of the 4 sides is colored to represent an element, planet, or zodiacal sign. Each pyramidal structure is home to an angel or spirit whose characteristics are determined by the specific elemental mix as indicated by the colors on its sides. The letter on the top of the pyramid is the angel's name, or a letter in the name of a larger angel. For example, if a pyramid lettered A is colored yellow, air, on 2 sides, and blue, water, on the other 2 sides, it houses an elemental being named A, whose character and scope of intelligence is defined by, and limited exclusively to, the elemental natures of air and water. Using the classic elemental images of the cherubic beasts, lion equals fire, eagle equals water, human equals air, and bull equals earth. The 4 beasts of the vision of Ezekiel signing the cherubic or fixed signs of the zodiac: Leo, fire, lion; Scorpio, water, eagle; Aquarius, air, human; Taurus, earth, bull. Angel A could be symbolically represented as a sphinx with a man's head and body for air, and an eagle's wings and legs for water. Obviously, such an elemental spirit would have a very narrow range of duties in the universe. On the material plane, these duties might regulate the behavior of clouds or mists. In the human psyche, they may play a specific part in the dynamics of our emotional life. Then let's say that right next to Angel A lives Angel B, who is half earth, black or green, and half fire, red. Angel B would naturally have drastically different characteristics than Angel A. Using cherubic images, it would have the head and body of a bull, earth with the paws and legs of a lion, fire. Keeping this in mind, we see that each Enochian elemental tablet has, first of all, 156 angels with 1-letter names, and very specific attributes and responsibilities in the universe. However, we do not stop here. Enochian elemental spirits are modular. They fit together just like the elements fit together in infinite combinations and ratios to create the phenomenal universe. Angel A can join with its neighbor Angel B to create Angel AB, whose characteristics are more complex than either A or B alone. Angel AB in turn can join with other squares to form bigger and even more intricate beings, etc. The more I learned about the Enochian system, the more thrilled I became at its divine perfection. The laws that dictate the ordering of the elements and the organization of the squares are examples of hermetic logic at its most sublime. The class was enthralled. Most members set to work painting their own set of tablets. As complex as the process appears to be at first, the simple act of coloring the tablets makes the method to the madness easy to understand. In the meantime, I was determined to build a full set of 3-dimensional Enochian tablets. Up until this time, Enochian magicians simply drew the pyramids on a flat surface. I mentioned my plan to Dr. Rhaegar D, who counseled strongly against it. "They're dangerous enough when they're flat," he cautioned. "Don't give them dimensional elbow room." As much as I respected the good doctor, I really didn't see how it would hurt to fully manifest the tablets in 3D. In fact, I thought maybe the reason Rhaegar D's Enochian spirits were so crabby was because he had them all squished into the flat tablets. I commissioned Kurt, who owned a table saw, to cut 644 wooden, truncated pyramids with 1-inch bases. I bought sandpaper, sealant, and acrylic paints. As soon as the pyramids were cut, I went to work like a man possessed. I got up early in the morning to sand, seal, and paint. I became totally engrossed in the project. Time lost all meaning to me. Each morning I found myself arriving at my job later than the morning before. The tablets were all I could think about. Every day I stole away from work a little earlier so I could get home to sand, seal, and paint. Soon I was sanding and sealing and painting all day long because I no longer had a job to distract me. I didn't care. The tablets were indescribably beautiful. I was so proud. I finished the small tablet of Union first, then the elemental tablet of Earth. I couldn't wait until the other tablets were finished. I was determined we would try out the Earth tablet at the next class. Up until this point, my only experiences with spirit evocation had been of the goetic Solomonic variety. I did not have a clue what to expect from an Enochian working, and I was particularly unsure how to proceed in a group setting. Mercifully, there was no ambiguity about the technical procedures. Temple openings, Enochian calls, and the angelic hierarchies were all laid out quite clearly in Libra Chanok. I performed a series of experimental evocations, a cherub from each of the 4 tablets, before retiring on 4 consecutive nights. I made notes of my dreams and concluded that this kind of work was harmless and effective. For our first evocation session, I decided we would work as Dee and Kelly did. One person would act as seer and one as operator. The seer would recite the appropriate call, receive the vision, and communicate it during or after the session. The operator would banish, open and close the temple, and question the seer. I would be the operator, but I did not know who in our little class would be the first to sit in the visionary driver's seat. On class night, there was only one rather reluctant volunteer. David P. Wilson was not new to the world of magic, In the years leading up to his affiliation with our lodge, he sat in with a host of magical groups and workshops in the Los Angeles area, upon whom he later heaped scorn and ridicule because of their inability to show him real magic. He was the boldest member of the class, also the most impatient and sarcastic. I could see the Enochian class going down in flames on opening night because David the curmudgeon once again saw nothing. He had done none of the preliminary Enochian work with the rest of the class. He hadn't painted a set of tablets or studied any of the calls. Still, he was our only one volunteer. I can't recall why, but I decided we would try to contact Laidrom, the Mars Senior of the Elemental Tablet of Earth. Each elemental tablet has a solar king and 6 planetary seniors. These 7 spirits are very high in the Enochian hierarchical ladder. Their names are drawn from the squares of the great cross that separates each elemental tablet into 4 subdivisions or subangles. In the spirit of better safe than sorry, we placed the Earth tablet in the south, Capricorn Cardinal Earth, and enclosed the entire class in a circle cast with a clothesline cord. I banished with the rituals of the lesser and greater pentagrams and hexagrams, and opened the temple and invoked the hierarchical names as indicated in the Liber Chanakh. David was seated on the floor at the southern edge of the circle, just inches away from the Earth tablet. Leaning against the wall behind the tablet was a huge cardboard version of the Tablet of Earth that I placed there for the other members of the class to focus upon. I turned on the tape recorder and gave David a copy of the call to read. I sat down behind him while he read it aloud. He did rather well considering he had never read it before. When he was finished, he closed his eyes and took a deep breath. Nothing happened. I asked him to read the call again. He did so, and after only a few seconds he said, "I have a landscape. I see a landscape." I was relieved beyond words. "What does it look like?" David proceeded to describe in surprising detail a desert vista of flat, trackless, white, crystalline powder stretching to the horizon. Great gray columns of volcanic rock towering over the plain broke the monotony of the scene. Between the columns, the ground was pockmarked with countless gaping pits. That was it. Nothing else was occurring. I asked him to read the call a third time. This time there was movement. From out of a pit in the center of his field of vision arose a black cone. He said it sparkled from the inside, and upon its surface, with thousands of little sparks that jumped from one star to another. I asked, "Is this Laidrom or Laidrom?" David grabbed his pencil and notepad and quickly scribbled something. I looked at what he had drawn. It looked like 4 very poorly drawn Enochian letters. At the time, it meant nothing to me. I asked him for a clear answer. "Is this Laidrom?" "It's him, I see him!" He described a humanoid figure draped in the same material from which the cone was constructed. He had an egg-shaped head, but no face. His hands were like mittens. There were no fingers. He reached his arm toward the ground and drew a diagram in the sand in front of him. David quickly copied the figure on the notepad. It was a square, divided diagonally by 2 lines, with a small circle in the lower left-hand corner. We took this to be Laidrom's signature. We were all very excited. It was as if the entire class saw David's vision in our mind's eye. Then it occurred to me, now that we've got this guy, what the hell are we going to do with him? Before I could think of what to do next, David said, "Lon, I feel I can make some strange sounds." This was a twist. "Let yourself," I told him. "Go with it." I tried to sound calm. "Non en tehilo ho athaizo regef." This is bullshit. No, relax, let it happen. I mean, I feel like an idiot. I'm too zilzi and zilzi lo dar nanta ifi tarzi. I'm sorry. That's all. Nothing like this has ever happened before. I just felt like doing it. David's apology was comical. We all broke into nervous giggles. It had been quite an evening. As we had planned nothing particular to do with Laidrom, I thought it wise to quit while we were ahead. I asked David to thank our spirit guest for his visit and proceeded to banish and close the temple. One of the class members had brought along his Enochian dictionary and suggested we try to use it to see if David's strange babbling actually meant something. I rewound the tape and played it back from the beginning. Everything was crystal clear right up to the time of Laidrom's appearance, when the tape developed an irritating distortion. We joked that it was the fault of the malicious spirits and expected it to soon clear up. It did not. In fact, by the time the tape reached David's babbling, we could hardly pick his voice out from behind the bank of white noise. As soon as the good stuff was over, the distortion suddenly stopped. Noise notwithstanding, after replaying the section of tape a dozen times or more, we picked up enough of what was being said to write down 3 audible strings of syllables. "Na'un tahilo ho afaizo regef zilzi and zilzi lo darp nanta," and Effi Tharzi. Starting at the beginning, we painstakingly played with the phonetics of each word and the words following, and attempted to match them with words in the Enochian dictionary. Obviously, we weren't being very scientific, nor, I confess, very objective. This was all very exciting and romantic, and I am sure that night we would have squeezed some profundity out of any string of sounds, be that as it may, It took less than an hour to break the sounds up as follows. Nanta ilo hoaf zorge f, which translated neatly to Spirit of Earth, first worshiper friendly visit. Zilzien, stretch forth hands. Zilo dark nanta, stretch forth and conquer Spirit of Earth. F etharzi, visit in peace. Needless to say, we were all very impressed. At the end of the evening, it was agreed that from then on, class would meet 2 times a week to pursue Enochian magic. Sadly, David's ability to break spontaneously into the Enochian language would diminish rapidly as his familiarity with the language of the calls increased. After the 4th or 5th session, he lost the ability completely. His visions, on the other hand, became clearer, more informative, more provocative. The Enochian Studies class continued twice weekly for nearly 3 years. During that time, David was the primary scryer, but each of us regularly took our turn at the wheel. We systematically worked our way through the spirits of the elemental tablets, starting with the seniors, 6 seniors per tablet, then the cherubs, 4 primary cherubs per tablet, 1 governing each subangle, then the servitors, 16 primary servitors per tablet, 4 per subangle under the rulership of the primary cherub. Early in our work with the planetary seniors, a most extraordinary session took place. Our subject that evening was ACMBICU, Mercury Senior of the Elemental Tablet of Earth. He was only the 4th senior we had called forth, and his appearance was a shocking departure from those of the previous visions. Before our first session with ACMBICU, each senior appeared attractively humanoid or even superhuman. ACMBICU immediately emerged in David's vision as a monstrous variation of a great ape. His actions were violent and senseless. "What is this thing doing?" I asked. To this day, I can still hear David's deep and dramatic voice. "He's squatting down on the ground and throwing mud in his crotch." All attempts to communicate with ACMBICU were answered by similar obscene and inscrutable gestures. This was hardly the androgynous visage, refined behavior, and eloquent conversation we expected from a spirit of Mercury. Over and over again, I asked the standard set of questions that we developed when working with the other seniors. What is the nature of your being? What are your duties in nature? How do you manifest in the human heart, the human emotions, and human desires? Have you ever possessed a figure in human history? Have your qualities ever been described as a character in literature that we might recognize? ACMBICU ignored every question. I realize these questions may seem strange and somewhat trivial. We learned earlier in our Enochian work that we learn nothing from a spirit unless we understand how it executes its specific duties in nature and ourselves. It should be obvious that historic or literary characters are expressions of spirits. When the Venus Senior of the Elemental Tablet of Air tells you she possessed Isidore Duncan, you immediately understand 1,000 collateral things about the spirit. Also, I do recall it telling us that its sacred animal was the armadillo. Eventually, his behavior locked in a curious, repetitious loop. David described a line of white rocks about the size of footballs laying on the dirt in front of the spirit. ACMBICU then would pick up one rock in his right hand and another rock in his left hand and replace one with the other on the ground. He then did the same thing, replacing the rocks to their original places. This happened over and over again until we gave up, banished the temple, and called it a night. It was the first time that a session ended in such disappointment. Poor David worried that he might be losing his seership skill, and the same way he lost the ability to speak Enochian. After the lights came up and the tea was poured, we debriefed like we did every session. David made a quick sketch of ACMBICU, and we all passed it around and joked about its muddy crotch. I asked David to draw the rocks. What's there to draw? They were rocks. He hurriedly drew 7 rough circles in a vertical line. Then he drew a double-headed arrow pointing to and from the 2nd and 4th rocks from the top. We scratched our heads and concluded there was no cosmic significance to the drawing or evening's labor. As I removed the elemental tablet of Earth from the table, I tried to locate ACIMBCU's name written in Enochian on the bottom left vertical arm with the great cross that separates the tablet into 4 equal sections. I couldn't find it. I sat the tablet down and looked more closely. I lettered all my tablets using Enochian characters that are rather hard to read, especially after a long night. Then the proverbial light bulb went on over my head. 7 rocks, 7 letters in ACMBICU's name. I took the drawing of David's rocks and labeled them ACMBICU. Then I looked at my tablet of Earth. ABMCICU. The coloring on the sides of the C and the B pyramids was exactly alike. When I glued the pyramids to the tablet, I must have carelessly reversed their position and didn't catch my mistake until now. "Look at this!" I called David and the others over to see my discovery. No wonder ACMBICU was so screwed up. We weren't talking to ACMBICU. We were talking to his perverted cousin ABMCICU, who was kind enough to show us that we were doing wrong. Shortly after the first ACMBICU session, a friend was kind enough to give me a set of microfilm enlargements of D. and Kelly's Reformed tablets. In these later versions of the tablets, there are numerous changes in the lettering of the squares. In the reformed versions, the Mercury Senior of Earth is spelled AHMLICU.
Science can explain everything if we look hard enough.
Shut up, science bitch.
Nothing is true. Everything is real.
Not only is he like ruining my life, but with all this God shit that he's into, he could be ruining my afterlife.
It's a sort of interdimensional vagina that somehow appears. I can interact with it.
Fabric of the entire universe could be torn apart.
I know my mind is changing. I'm already too far gone to know what to do.
Nothing is true. Nothing is true. Nothing is true. Nothing is true. Everything is real.